So I'm Gary Kitchen. How are you? Honored to have my brother Dan with me, who doesn't come to a lot of these, but and this is a junior guy that worked with us at Activision. You may have heard of him.
Dave, you were head of the janitorial services, I think?
Yeah. So anyway, we don't come to these things with a big, robust presentation. We were just saying we may, for next year, we may actually come with something. But we kind of just wing it. So would you like to tell stories, or would you like to answer questions? What would you guys like to hear?
Story.
Stories. Okay. How did Dave start Activision?
Well, the story of Activision is not necessarily a really happy one because we were working at Atari and we kind of enjoyed working at Atari, but Atari no longer enjoyed having us. So we kind of had a falling out, and so four of us who had done a lot of the projects for Atari on the 2600 spun off and started Activision. At the time, Activision, it's known as the first third-party publisher of software for video gamers. Because at the time, Atari made cartridges for the Atari 2600, and Mattel made cartridges for the Intellivision, and Coleco made cartridges for the ColecoVision, and Fairchild made cartridges for the Fairchild, Jennell and all that. Activision was the first company to develop and publish video games without being affiliated with a console manufacturer. So it's kind of a big deal because, I was at a GDC, speaking at a GDC conference a few years ago, and had 600 people in the audience ask for a show of hands of who works for third-party publishing companies, and everybody. And there are a few people who make games for Sony and work at Sony, but otherwise, everybody's games come from somewhere else. So it was the harbinger of the future. It was how the business is today. So that's Activision's legacy. So we had made a lot of good games at Atari, but now we were the young upstart company that we had no great arcade titles that we could start making home versions of. We had every game that we were going to put out, we're going to be looked at as who the heck are these guys? They're not Atari, they can't be any good. So we worked really hard to make the games better than everything we had out there, either work we had done before or work that was being done out there. And that's how Activision got its reputation.
Yeah, and that reminds me of the story where in New Jersey, Dan and I were in New Jersey. We, one day we went in the store, I'm not sure what store it was, and lo and behold, there's a 2600 game by a company that isn't Atari. And we just rolled on the ground laughing. Like, who the heck are these people? And it was Skiing by Activision. And I brought it home, put it in, expected to laugh hysterically at the quality, and was pretty amazed. Said, hey, these guys know what they're doing. And they had a great philosophy in releasing the games. I think it was quarterly. Every quarter at the same time, 2 games would come out. And you really anticipated what are the next 2 Activision games coming out, what are they going to be. They had the newsletter that kind of talked in advance of what they were. And it was, I actually thought that was a great way to distribute it because you really built up a demand for the games ahead of them releasing. And it was really cool, but I remember we were blown away by Bob Whitehead's Skiing. It was amazing.
At the time, Gary was, I think, working on Space Jockey, which was, he was kind of the first individual homebrew indie guy to do an Atari 2600 game. Did it for
U.S. Games.
U.S. Games. And
even though Ed Salvo was probably parallel, because Ed Salvo
was he doing
Apollo games about at the same
time?
Yeah.
Okay. And we also had a small development company doing Apple software, and we were enamored by the guys at Activision. We took out the instruction manual, and on the back is the picture of the 4 designers.
He's embarrassing us now.
So embarrassing us. And we worked in Gary's basement in his house in New Jersey, writing software, and hand wiring little development boards to plug into our Apple, to plug into the Atari 2600, to write 4K games, and Gary was leading the charge on that. And I remember he took out the little manual, and it was myself, Gary, and two other guys in the basement, and we drew pictures of ourselves and stuffed them over the manual and pasted it on a wall with a piece of Scotch tape and said, someday we're going to work with those guys. And lo and behold, Gary, you can talk about the CES in 1980.
Well, and I tried to destroy that, but at one point Dave found it, and he's never let me live it down since then. But
Yeah.
yes, I agree. I wish that, I wonder if that'll be great for the museum, but it's long gone.
Long ago.
Yeah, long gone.
I think, Gary,
shredded it and burned
I
it.
think your face was pasted right over Dave's.
Yeah, I think it was. So, has anybody heard the story of the bug in one of Dave's games? If you've heard the story of the decathlon bug, give me a show of hands.
Yeah, everybody's heard it.
Anybody, do you want to hear the story of the decathlon bug?
Yeah.
Come on, you got it. All right, this is a great story. We don't have a lot of time, so we might as well go right to the good stuff.
Well, you know, we publish these games on ROM, and that means you don't rev it. I mean, it has to be bug-free. There are a couple bugs in one or two of the games. Larry Kaplan ended up with a bug in Bridge that if you happen to bid 7 no trump under a certain circumstance, it will crash. And anybody who plays Bridge knows that you don't bid 7 no trump very often anyway. So a lot of people don't even know that exists. But you know, there's occasional. I think there was a bug in Laser Blast where I don't remember what caused the bug, but occasionally it would also crash. And I fixed it, and I think we revved the ROM later on that one. And I like to joke that I changed 1 bit. When I rewrote the code, I had to change 1 bit. So 16,383 of the bits were correct, and 1 was incorrect. But in the decathlon, I had just finished decathlon and released it to manufacturing. And nobody had ever seen it. This was, you know, our top secret lab, and we hadn't yet teased it at a trade show because of the timing was. And we had an event at Activision where we, the designers of the games, were the wish of a terminally ill child in the Make-A-Wish program. And his wish was to be flown to Mountain View, California, get to see the lab, you know, watch the work in progress, be behind the scenes of this top secret lab, meet all of his game designers and such. And so he came the day after I had released this code to manufacturing. We were sitting in a conference room with his video crew from the Make-A-Wish Foundation, and one of his rewards was to be the first non-Activision person to play the Activision Decathlon. And so we sat there for a while. I showed him how to use the game. He's a good game player.
And Dave's kind of being interviewed.
Right.
So he's watching the kid play, but he's also answering questions. So he's doing like this.
We're on camera being filmed. And so anyway, we get to the pole vault event. And you know, with the decathlon, you move the joystick back and forth as fast as you can to try to run, and then you press the button once to plant the pole vault, and then when you get up to a certain height, you press it again to fly over, and you know, trying to get to the higher and higher height as they do in the Olympics. It's all built into the game. And so our young man was running as hard as he could. He pressed the button to plant the pole vault, and then the interviewer interrupted him and asked him a question. And so his attention went to the interviewer, and he knew that he was supposed to press the button to release and go over the bar. So he pressed the button, and while he was talking to the interviewer, he just kept pressing the button. And I'm watching the screen and watching the guy go up.
Higher and higher and higher.
Until he's off the screen. Now, I've never seen what the look of my face was on camera. Hopefully I had a good poker face. But at that point, we were taking breaks, and at the break, I said, "Could you guys excuse me? I need to go to the manufacturing people." And I went across to the other building and looked him up, and I said, "You've got a bug in Decathlon, I'll stay all night to fix it," or whatever. And the guy looked at me and said, "Too late. We sent this off to manufacturing." And to this day, I mean, I certainly read the code and gave it to him as soon as possible, and whether or not he managed to get it into the manufacturing process before any buggy ones went out, I don't know. So this day, I don't even know if there are versions out there that have that bug. But you discover bugs in your software many times. It's just not usually while a television film crew.
So Rebecca Heineman and Jennell Jaquays joined.
Late as usual.
We were late to the party. I mean, I got to the Atari 600 about 2 years after you guys did, so.
And of course, I worked for a company that was a late adopter on everything. They waited till other people were making money.
Coleco.
I have another story about a bug, and then we'll hand it over, and maybe you guys have some similar. You know, sometimes bugs are fortuitous. Dave and I were working on a game called A Boy and His Blob on the NES, and it was quite the crunch. You read about crunches today. Red Redemption 3, everybody's talking about 100 hours a week. That's nothing, 100 hours a week. But anyway, so we were really cramming on this, and Dave was designing and writing code, and I was helping him on some levels. And you remember in Keystone Capers, you have the balls that bounce and you jump. You have to time a jump to get over them because they bounce higher than, it's not just a simple jump, you have to time it. So I wrote in the NES, I said, let's write some little object that bounces and I'll see what I can do with it in this game. So I wrote this object of this thing bouncing, but I didn't do it right.
Right.
So I run the code, and the code's supposed to seed this bouncing object and have it bounce. Well, what it does is it seeds it, and it gets about this far in the bounce, and it seeds another, and it gets about this far in the bounce. And I have this stream of these bouncing objects, like hundreds of them, because I didn't properly debounce the seeding of the object. And I said, oh, hey, wait a minute, it looks like a centipede. And I showed it to David, I said, we should put this in the game. So that ended up being one of the characters down underneath. So, you know, sometimes bugs work. Dan had a famous bug in Kung Fu, right? Kung Fu.
I had a famous bug in Kung Fu Master that to this day I can't make happen anymore.
Where at a certain level, if you get up to a high level, it just says goodbye. Because it was a bang switching problem. But I think it was red. So it's only certain cartridges.
There's still one bug where there's three enemies coming at you, and you hit them one at a time, and in the kernel I changed it from 3, 2, 1. And at one point I found that I could hit the first guy and all three would disappear. And to this day I was unable to replicate it.
Well, that's handy.
But it's still out there. And it can help you get by level 3 if you really find out how to do it.
Ladies?
Well, let's see. Mine's not really more of a bug, it's more of a feature.
That's really cool.
Well, that's what they're all
Yes.
about.
After manufacturing, it's always a feature.
Well, this is more intentionally, because you see, like Warren Robinette was concerned about not having his the games he worked on known. I was concerned about that when I was working initially at Interplay, because we were all publishing games as Interplay, but there was not really any emphasis on who did it. So, since my nickname was Burger, in about 9 games, if you typed in the word burger at appropriate times, it would either kill you instantly or do something horrible, but always do something totally unexpected. And it was my calling card. So if anybody said, I didn't work on that game, says, well, then why is that there?
It's an insurance policy.
Yeah, like the most famous is that there was a game called The Bard's Tale. I wrote Bard's Tale 1 and 2 for the Apple II GS. Totally new engine, new game. I created it completely. Yet some people said they want to be able to say they created it. So in a place called Tarjan's Dungeon, you're supposed to say the name of the mad guy. But if you type in the word burger, it goes, you have uttered the most unholy word, prepare to die. And then you have 99 of those horrible monsters in the entire game. Unless you have level 40 characters, you have no hope.
That's good.
Yeah. And then when I went to Bard's Tale 2, I did it again, except this time it actually defeated the monsters. The priest says, we'll have to try that again. And they did it again.
So,
Any questions? Oh, go ahead, sorry.
Got one
After
more.
you do it, they'll...
Okay, I'll go to one quote related to the Atari 2600. I'm not going to steal one of your stories. But
Well, you can't, because Atari, not didn't have any fun.
it's true. It had, but there was something in Atari Carnival that had
Did
a
it?
feature.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Well, let's talk about it. You want to talk about the feature?
Yes, I'd like to know.
Related to you and your siblings.
Yes, yes.
Okay, the feature in Atari Carnival was we were doing, well, first I'm going to do a story then leading to it. First story is that when I worked at Coleco in the 80s, we were producing games for all three popular consoles at the time, for the Coleco, which was our house game system, for the television, and for the Atari 2600. Well, with the ColecoVision, our goal was to make the product look as exactly like the arcade pieces as was possible. And the tile-type graphics almost allowed that to, they were a budget version of the variants of the games. Well, the Intellivision and the Atari weren't really intended to duplicate those type of games. So we got called out that we were intentionally making the Intellivision and the Atari game versions look bad. No, we were doing our darndest to make them.
And I've been telling people that for years.
Yeah,
No one
look
believes
good.
it.
But one of the games that really did simulate the arcade game was the Carnival game, and it really worked good on the Atari. Except there was a feature to play the game a certain way, and I have no idea. Don't even ask me. You shot something, you waited something, you did something that you normally wouldn't do in the game, and a credit line would drop.
Yes.
I remember that, yes. I don't know how to do it, but-
Easter egg, yes.
Yes.
I remember we
Yep.
were shown that,
Yep.
And
but I can't replicate.
Coleco management went berserk
Did they?
over that.
Well, what me?
Wasn't me.
Yeah, I know, but the point was that there was no credit for Coleco people in the games at all. Not until later on when we got a vice president in who was concerned about the employees as opposed to the brand name.
Yeah.
When we finally got our name credits in some of the manuals or some of the side publication documents.
Wow.
But that's kind of like one of the biggest ones. The worst bug that we ever shipped was, that I remember, was a ColecoVision title called Victory. Simulating the arcade game, we sent, my designers, our QA people, we sent off a perfect, we were tested and certain that the ROMs worked. We sent it off to manufacturing in the Far East. When it came back as manufactured cartridges, we plugged it in and, oh my goodness, it was completely broken. I mean, it played, but it wasn't our game. It wasn't even, things went up on the screen, you could shoot things, but there was no game to it. It was gone, it was broken. And we brought this to our management's attention, and they just said, oh, ship it anyway.
Oh my God. Oh,
Victory is not the game it's supposed to be.
wow. So we've got a half hour, 25 minutes. Any questions? We want to go to QA right now because that's usually when we get a lot of interesting things. Go ahead.
Who came up with the idea for the Activision patches?
When we left Atari, there were 4 of us, we were technical guys, and we thought maybe we'd start a company that just contracted back to Atari, made games or whatever, just wanted to be independent. But we ran into, very quickly in the process, we ran into Jim Levy, who ended up our CEO. And his background, he had worked for GRT Records and Tapes, which was a music duplication system. And they were kind of starting to think about getting into computer software or something like that. So he had a background in the record business and promoting, things and products. and also was starting to get into the software business, so it was a really good fit. And, you know, a lot of the things that you recognize as cool stuff that Activision did, there's the very technical stuff that we did, and all the marketing stuff is Jim Levy. He had great ideas of how to sell products, how to promote products. The patches were his idea, the newsletter, which was kind of associated with the patches so that you would get, you know, top scores would show up in the newsletter and all that. It was all the kinds of things that he was doing outside of what we were doing. You know, there's a couple different ways of looking at the marketing department in a video game development company. And in some companies, the philosophy is that marketing is responsible for market research, to go out and find out what products should product development be doing. And we wouldn't have tolerated that. We didn't tolerate it at Atari. We wouldn't have tolerated it at Activision. Don't tell me what is a good game or what the market wants to have as the next video game. That's my job, and I'll figure that out, and we'll make great games. Our philosophy was that marketing is part of a sales group. We finish our product, we hand it to you. You can do anything you want, figure out how to market it, sell it, and whatever, but you don't mess with the game concept. And there was a very good separation at Activision of those two functions. And Jim Levy had great ideas, and we built the company up, you know, it was meteoric rise. Yes, we made great games, but it also had to be marketed and sold.
Yep.
What I always say is my job is to create valuable IP, but I can make the best game ever made. And if somebody can't turn around and figure out how to reach customers and consumers and market it and turn it into cash and commercialize it, then that was zero value. So you really have to reward, you know, the people who can do that. Create a great game, hand it off to a good group who can then commercialize it. And Activision was really good at that.
Yep.
Are you the person who worked at Activision?
Which one? Dan? The three of us worked at Activision.
Like, so this question is a weird one, but bear with me. Like, you worked at Activision, but did you compare works now like Call of Duty?
I think, you know, Bobby Kotick, who's the CEO of Activision, basically bought the company out of bankruptcy in the mid-'80s. He's done an astounding job building it up to what it is now. You know, Call of Duty is a billion-dollar business every year. And the game is very well rated. I mean, I always look at the Metacritic scores, and they're not putting out junk. I mean, those are very good playing games. You know, there's some question of their business practices. They've gotten some bad press. But all in all, I mean, I have a lot of respect for them. They've done a tremendous job building what is arguably the biggest third-party software company.
Yeah, here's a problem that you all need to be aware of philosophically, and that is, you know, in today's business, a person with a computer and a $99 iPhone or what do they call it? iOS account, no, the account that you get from Apple for $99.
Oh, yeah, the
whatever.
developer account, yeah.
You can publish a video game, all right? There's millions of people now publishing video games. They don't have any costs associated with them, no big deal. A game like Call of Duty requires hundreds of professionals, all making a lot of money. You know, good salaries, working every day, working hard, working together, creating this product. And so it's the same thing. If you're going to try to create something like Call of Duty, you're going to have hundreds of people. You're going to have their salaries, their benefits, their overhead, the entire business that it takes to create something like that.
And the same on the marketing side.
And the same on the marketing side. You have to be able to reach the people. You have to be able to make the products. You have to be able to ship the products. There's so much money that has to be spent to make this happen. And, you know, so it's very hard. How do you walk into a business and say, all right, I'm going to make the next Call of Duty? Well, you have $100 million to build the infrastructure necessary to do that. Can you find 300 professionals who aren't already busy working for somebody else? So, I mean, I just like to tell people, if you like big projects like that. I mean, Gary and I tend to like smaller projects, just, fewer people and little casual type gameplay. But if you like those kinds of games, don't hesitate to pay full price for it, because if Activision doesn't make some profit out of all of the money that they had to invest to make it, they won't make you another.
And I was on a call the other day, and somebody was talking about industries, and they obviously didn't know how big the game industry was. And it was a big conference call, a lot of people on, and I said, I just have to point out that the biggest entertainment launches are not films. It's not Avatar. It's not, the latest Spider-Man movie. I said, these guys launch a game, and in a week they do $1 billion. That's not, anywhere near these other industries. By far and away, the largest entertainment launches in the world are video games. How much money is Red Redemption 2 going to make in a couple of weeks? It's insane. I mean, an industry where you can take in $1 billion at retail within a week or two is far bigger than Hollywood. So it's amazing.
Yeah, what I'm saying is when you hear that Activision made $1 billion in sales in a week, be happy for them, because they spent hundreds of millions of dollars already, and if they didn't make $1 billion and they only made $500 million, everybody gets laid off. All over, the entire industry is out of business. So the margins are not very big. I mean, this is really very tight. If you don't sell the number of games that you think you're going to sell, you're losing money. And so don't feel, some people would look at that and say, oh, Activision is just raking in money, they're raping us for this price. Be happy for them if they make $1 billion in sales.
Yeah, because you get more good games.
You're going to get another good game out of it.
An interesting little trivia note is the gentleman who ran that division, that lab of Sledgehammer, was a guy that Gary and I hired and brought into the game industry in 1988.
Yeah, he was painting billboards at the time.
He was painting billboards at the time, and we knew him through another friend, a mutual friend, and we saw his work, and I think we both looked at it and said, he could probably do video game work. And we convinced him to come into the game industry, and we hired him, and he did a number of titles for us on the original Game Boy, the NES, and
As art.
As art, for art and animation, and he did some work with our licensed titles. And he eventually left us in the middle 90s and went to California and
started to produce
Sledgehammer,
Yeah.
which brought about the Call of Duty series.
Dead Space was his. Glenn Schofield.
Yes, Glenn was one of our employees.
And he's
back at
absolutely brilliant and incredibly successful.
Is there going to be a Keystone Capers 2 where he's running on top of a train?
Oh, that's all just a dirty rumor.
Yeah, it's all right, yeah.
Yeah, Dan, why don't you talk about that?
Come on, guys.
So after Gary did Keystone Capers, which was an amazing hit for Activision, in the lab I was playing around with my second game after Crackpots and started to make a train on the screen, and I think we both looked at it and said, hey, why don't you put Keystone Kelly up there? And after 6 months of playing around, I had a ROM of Keystone Kelly on a train in the desert. And then the video game crash of '83 happened, and we were all pulled off on other projects. And I made a cartridge and put it away and never saw it again. And I kept telling the guys who used to run the Classic Gaming Show that, hey, I have this cartridge somewhere in my offsite storage. And after about 15 years of saying that every year, they said, sure you do, Dan. And so they never believed me anymore. Well, lo and behold, this past June, I'm cleaning out some offsite storage, and I found the cartridge.
Oh, boy.
Red cartridge labeled, typewriter, 1983 Activision. And I immediately called my brother and called John Hardy, who's the director of the National Video Game Museum, and said I finally found the cartridge. John happened to be up in the New York area visiting family, and so he came over to my place. We plugged it in, and it came up. It was Keystone Kelly running on a train, jumping.
Just a demo at that point.
Just a demo. Yeah, no enemies, no gameplay per se. And about a few months before there, Gary introduced me to a tool that he had found that allowed him on the computer and iPads to write 2600 software. So I started playing around with that, trying to recreate this Keystone Capers 2 that I had lost 35 years ago. And strangely enough, when I compared the two, the ROM to the work I had, it was almost perfect. My memory was perfect, thank God. I didn't lose too many brain cells. So what I'm doing now is I've donated that cartridge to the National Video Game Museum, and I am actually recreating the game and finishing it, which will be out early next year, and it will be called Gold Rush. As a matter of fact, I have some trading cards for the game that will be up here. Please, everyone, come up and get a trading card. We're going to have a series of trading cards for all the characters, and we'll be putting it up on Kickstarter in a few months, and happy to have you subscribe to my website and get information about the development and some background that not everyone will get about how it's being developed and the status of it. And so that cartridge has had a 35-year trail and a 35-year journey to today, where I will actually finish the game that I started with Gary in the Activision lab back in 1983.
If you come up with a high score, I'll make a patch for you.
Thank you so much. Well, as Dave said yesterday at dinner, you know, every game I had, when I finished the game, I was the high score, I was the world score winner.
Before the game went out.
Before the game went out. Dave said, I've had so many high scores in my life with all my games, Laser Blast,
100 world records.
100 world records.
For 5 minutes.
For about 5 minutes until you release the game. So I will probably earn a patch once. That'll be it.
I held the world record for Atari 2600 Space Invaders. I was the national champion.
Were you really?
I was actually huge fan of your work. I was wondering if you could explain the story of how Dragon Wars got its name and how it didn't utilize the Barstow license.
Okay, for backstory, I was one of the programmers on Bard's Tale 1 and 2 for the Apple II and so forth, and I was a creator of Bard's Tale 1 and 2 for the Apple II GS. Later on, I took over the project and I created Bard's Tale 3. After it shipped, I started working on what was to be called Bard's Tale 4. It was, you know, everything I learned from what I did in Bard's Tale 3, I went ahead and implemented in Bard's Tale 4. It was a total reimagination. But unfortunately, at that precise moment in time, Interplay was becoming its own publisher. Instead of doing products through Electronic Arts, we were going to publish ourselves. And EA was in the bidding to try to be our distributor. It lost to Activision. EA was pissed. To say that, they were utterly pissed. So as a result, they then said, hey, you know Interplay? We own the trademark to Bard's Tale. You can't use that because you didn't go with us. So with that, I had to, and we were like 3-4 months away from shipping the game. So it was changed to Dragon Wars, and but when you play Dragon Wars, you look at this, man, this game looks just like Bard's Tale.
It's a coincidence. That's all coincidence.
All games look alike.
And yes, Dragon Wars is another one of my games.
There were really only 3 video games. They just all rebranded.
But aren't they all Dave's?
Yeah.
There was a game of yours I really enjoyed on NES, Battle Tank.
Yeah.
What was it like transitioning from Atari to working on a Nintendo?
It wasn't that bad because the NES had the same processor, so 6502 family. So from a code standpoint, it wasn't that big a deal. I really liked Battle Tank. You're probably the only person in the history of the world who's ever said that they liked Battle Tank. Everyone always talks about Keystone Capers and all of them.
And Super Battle Tank.
Yeah, Super Battle Tank, yeah. I love the graphics on Super Battle Tank, it's good. But I really liked Battle Tank, and thank you for that compliment. You know, it was so amazing to go to a computer that actually had RAM and the ability to display objects on the screen and fancy stuff like that, from 2600 where you're painting every pixel. So it was a great transition, and we were just saying walking over here that I love the NES and the Super NES. I would love to write a game on NES or Super NES. Those are great platforms. But they're not as open as the 2600, where you could write a game today like Dan is doing, but on the NES, Super NES, you have issues of patents and things, and Nintendo tends to be fairly protected. But I do love Battle Tank. I like Super Battle Tank too. I enjoyed doing that. Those were 2 of my favorites. Kind of went off in a different direction from my other work. more quote military simulators, but we didn't really consider them military simulators.
No.
Just fun battle games. But thank you, I did enjoy that.
You know, we sit up here having been in this business for anywhere between 30 and 40 years. And you have to understand what that evolution is like. We generally started on the Atari 2600, and then there's the NES, and there's Super NES, there's ColecoVision, there's Intellivision, there's Odyssey 2. Then there's iPhone, or
Genesis.
yeah, there's Genesis, C64, 3DO. I didn't do any Neo Geo, but that was in there. Then we started doing early phone games. What were those operating systems called?
J2ME and Brew.
Symbian. Then, you know, then there's an iPhone and iPad. I have developed games on 25 different consoles. That's a 40-year career. And every time you know, the console lasts only a couple of years. So if you're going to be in this business that long, you're going to have this great success on the Atari 2600, and then all of a sudden, nobody buys the 2600 anymore. I didn't need to do NES games. You got to learn the NES, and you have to take your same skills and shoehorn them into a new piece of hardware. And then, hey, the Genesis comes out. Hey, then the Super Nintendo, you know. And so it's not a big deal for us to think about how did we go from 2600 to NES. We did that every other year for our entire career. And it's not that difficult either. Everything kind of evolves using the same ideas, you know. Every Nintendo product is sprite-based, or is sprite-based and character-based backgrounds, you know. And it was the 2600 was the only one that was really weird compared to all those. Everything else was almost the same. And as Gary said, they were all using the 6502 processor, which helped a lot.
For a while. But it actually, historically, it becomes frustrating. I think even today it becomes frustrating, because you hear from developers and designers that around the fourth year, their engines are perfect, their tools are perfect, they've learned all the tricks, and they're about to do the next greatest product, and then the platform's dead. And then you gotta start it all over again. So you don't ever really get to say, I am at my peak on the PS3, I'm gonna do the greatest PS3 game ever, and then it goes away.
Yeah,
Because PS4 comes out.
you've seen all of our products. You haven't seen every one of our drawing tools that we had to create to make those products. Every one of our compression algorithms.
Level
that we had to
algorithm,
create.
level layer
Every one
tools.
of, yeah, level layout tools. You know, we're making all these tools that you don't actually get to see. And as soon as the console goes away, we said, hey, we got to build we had to build development systems, hardware development systems for the NES to be able to make an NES game in the first place. Now you just write in Unity and it's all over.
Do you guys see that same thing?
Oh, yeah, well, and it's even with what they call stable platforms.
Yeah, right.
Like with the Mac. First, I did like 35 Mac games. First starting off with Mac OS 7. Then they changed it to Mac OS 9 with draw sprockets, so I had to redo my tools. Then they went to Mac OS 10 using OpenGL, so I had to redo my tools. Then they went to Metal, so I had to go ahead and redo my tools. It's still the Mac, but I have to keep...
It's the Mac, but it's not the Mac.
We're like blacksmiths, hammering it until we get the tools right.
Well, even with the PC code,
DirectX 7,
Well,
DirectX 9, DirectX
and
11.
someone says, hey, I can make that 3D engine work a little differently, except I'm gonna have to change the way you think about putting
Yeah, right.
objects
That's
together
right.
in a game.
So now your code's obsolete.
So code or content would be.
All right, enough on that. We got other questions here.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so sorry about 100 people that work for me spread out from North America. Today, you know, it's a challenge, but we've got email, we've got smartphones, we've got video conferencing. You know, back when you guys were working together, I know, you know, Dave was on the West Coast, you guys were on the East Coast. How did you make that work?
Well, we'll start at Atari and Activision. We were using PDP-11 computers, and the subdirectory had not yet been invented. The folder didn't exist. Everyone was in one partition of the hard drive, every single file of everybody in the entire department. So we used a suffix on every file. Mine was C for crane, and so I could do a dir star.c, or star, something like that, star.c.star, I guess it was. And I could directory my files and not see everybody else's files. So, you know, we had to actually figure out a way to partition the hard drive in our files. But otherwise, we were all in the same room. The first Activision computer didn't timeshare. So we had 4 developers sitting there with 4 development systems and a bunch of A/B switches. And you'd all agree, okay, everybody switch to A except me, I'm B. And I'm gonna edit and assemble and then download.
Oh,
And
God.
everyone else was writing on their listings the changes they're gonna make as soon as they were allowed to switch from A to B. Right? And, you know, so those kinds of things were, the technology was evolving, the entire industry, computer industry was evolving. And Gary and I did Boy and His Blob while I was in the West Coast and he was on the East Coast. And you guys don't even remember things like X modem, Z modem, Kermit. These were methods of transmitting files before the internet existed. None of them worked very well. Kermit was the best, you know, at being able to recover, but even it could fail. If you had one dropout on your telephone line, one hiccup on your telephone line, you have to start the whole thing over. Fortunately, AOL came to our rescue. Someone in AOL was smart enough to build their file upload download so that if it choked, it could restart midway. It actually had the ability
Yeah,
to restart.
they were the first ones.
So every night after I'm done working, I would go on AOL and I would send my file, and it was an 11-hour transfer or something like that.
Yeah, by the
And
morning.
then he'd get it in the afternoon
Yes.
and make some changes and send his changes back to me. And, you know,
That was version
AOL running a
control.
300 baud modem or 1200 baud modem.
In fact, we were racing to get Boy and His Blob done for manufacturing in Nintendo. Quick story. It had to, Nintendo had very strict rules. Had to be there on, you know, May 28th
By 5 p.m.
by 5 p.m. If they didn't have it, it didn't manufacture for Christmas.
You
End of
waited
story.
3 months to resubmit it.
Don't call us and complain, that's the rules. Well, we were down to bug testing last possible minute, and we weren't gonna make the
We
28th
weren't gonna make it.
with, I mean, there was no FedEx, so you had to put it on a plane and fly it there if you wanted to make it. So what we did is we got an engineer, put him on a plane with an entire development system, flew him to the hotel across the street from Nintendo, where he set up the entire development system, and we modemed code to him at about 4 o'clock on the 29th. He burned the ROM, walked in at 5, and handed it to him. So that's the level of craziness you had to go through.
Right, or else you missed,
Or else you
minus
missed.
the whole quarter, you lost sales.
We have 1 minute to go.
Yeah.
1 minute. I have been waved at the door. Last question. Sir in the blue there?
I'm just curious about with that naming convention, was Activision limited to only 26 employees?
Yes,
Well said.
that's correct. That's correct.
At least 26 developers.
Right.
Now you make me feel really good that I did my Atari 2600 development on an Apple II using a ROM emulator.
So did I.
Oh, so did
I.
That was.
And then they made me
That was
switch to a
Space Jockey.
PDP-11.
What the hell is
And I
that?
was like, oh my God, this is great. And I hit assemble, and about 7 minutes later, I'm like, what the hell is this thing doing?
Yeah, we
It
would
takes me
assemble-
30 seconds to assemble on an Apple.
Yeah, you hit the button, go to lunch, come back, oh, it hasn't done yet. Okay.
Our first 6502 assembler at Activision, we bought a computer off the floor at Hamilton AvNet because it was gonna take 8 weeks to get a PDP-11 shipped from DEC. So we bought their old show unit, floor unit, put it in a closet because we had to air condition it. So we put it in a closet and added a window air conditioner, put a hole in the wall to put an air conditioner on. And the cross assembler was written in Fortran. So it was running under Fortran, trying to cross assemble. It was 35 minutes to assemble a 2K game. And nobody could be editing their code during that 35 minutes.
Perfect.
How much did that computer cost you?
$16,000.
You don't have to, at the time it was only $1,000, right?
Yeah.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys.